Right, everybody, man. Oh man, the chefs, you on Strong Inspirations. I'm Anthony Brogdon, and I got a smooth brother on the channel. Man, this guy is one of them educators teaching them young minds. Is when you talk Black history to a Black person in particular, it make us feel better when you put that slant of how we overcame that, and or if it's not a story how we overcame, but how we succeeded despite them odds. This is what I try to do here on the channel, is I find these intelligent people who know some of these stories, and I ask them to come on here and give it to a straight no chaser. And that's what this guy is gonna do. Let me tell you, before I bring him on, there's a few things happening. I got my own festival in Quindaro, Kansas City, Kansas, May 27th through the 29th. I got room for 1,000 of y'all to show up. I'm gonna be posting the flyer in the next week. It's just a little bit of money because you get all you can eat food and drink, no alcohol, you know, punch and stuff like that. We're gonna have picnics and parties and tours of the city where them slaves walked across that Missouri River to get to their freedom. And then they told that man, don't come over here. We're going to fight to the end. Watch me. And I'm doing at least another one of those in Elaine, Arkansas. And then I talked to a guy who's on the channel in Timbuktu, New Jersey. I'm taking this thing on the road. I want to meet y'all. Y'all watching me. I want to watch you for a minute. We're going to party. All right, my friends. So things are happening here at the channel. I've gone global. I got people on here I've interviewed out of Australia, South Africa, Jamaica, London, Nova Scotia, Canada. And watch this. I got some other ones coming up in other parts of the world. What happened in New Zealand? Is it Black history in New Zealand? I'm doing it, and the people want to come on the channel. They want to share this, like my man does. He want to share this. My man, he was ready before I was ready. He was like, man, come on, let me get it on. I'm in an educational mode today. You're gonna like this. So what I want you to do is watch my movie. Boom, shakalaka. I'm a filmmaker. I'm serious about this. How slaves went to college. Hold on, in relation to my guest, what slaves did to get an education, put your life on the line because he didn't want you to learn how to read and write. You said, forget, I'll figure out a way. And it's in my movie. Good, 75 powerful, powerful minutes. It's streaming on Amazon. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. I took it to 40 cities on my own dime. And check it out. And it went as far as where my man is. I had a showing in Toronto. How about that, everybody? It was packed up there. I was like, ooh, man, I'm a little shocked at this. People liked it so much, I wrote the book. Black Business Book. It's got over 200 facts, and I'm talking about stuff that I know you don't know. And I'm so confident that it come with a money-back guarantee. You ever heard a book with a money? If you know everything in this book, I give your money back. That's how confident I am. And I give it to you straight, again, no chaser, because I don't add no commentary. I'm not going to pretend like I'm trying to interpret what happened. I let you do that. But I give it to you in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sentences and like that. And then I give you in the reference section where I found the fact. Because I had a guy, he was sitting there, he bought a book from me. I tell you the truth, I was playing tennis, right? And I carry the book wherever I go. So I said, hey, man, I got this book. I just beat him, and he was already feeling bad. I said, man, you need to check out my book. He checked it out. He sat there. He said, man, I ain't never heard this, man. You sure you telling this right? I said, it's in the reference section. It's that mind-blowing. Get you a copy of this. Go to my website, businessintheblack.net. Now, it's on Amazon. You can go to Amazon. But if you want to cut out the big man who got all the money in the world, you can go straight to my website, and we take all them credit cards and things like that. It's happening here at the channel. And you know, I use that word strong a lot. It's my favorite word. I've been using it for years. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is the introduction to my guest today. He's a strong soul, brother. Watch out. I'm telling you. Come on, man. Introduce yourself. Let's get it on.
Peace. Peace. How you doing, brother?
Yes, sir. Tell us your name. Tell us your name.
Yeah. So I'm Saladin Allah, and I reside here in the city of Niagara Falls, New York. I'm the third great grandson of famous Underground Railroad freedom seeker Josiah Henson, whose life was used as a primary narrative for the famous 19th century novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. So I'm an educator, I'm an author, I'm an animator, and I'm also a human rights commissioner for the city of Niagara Falls, New York.
Oh, okay. So let's talk about you for a second. So now you were born and raised there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and you just alluded a little bit, your family came from where to get there?
So part of my family is connected to Josiah Henson, who was enslaved in Charles County, Maryland in 1789. And he was enslaved for 41 years of his life until he was literally sold to his enslaver's brother's plantation in Kentucky. And it was at that point, at 41 years old, that he decided to take his wife and his 4 children on a 600-mile journey from Kentucky all the way up here to Western New York. And he left in September of 1830, and he made it across to the Canadian side in October of 1830. It took a month for that journey. He settled temporarily in a small community in Fort Erie, Ontario, Canada, called Little Africa. And the community leaders that lived in that small community, he convinced them to purchase their own land in order to fully actualize their sense of self-determination, because prior to that, the community of Little Africa was on Canadian government land. So they commissioned him to find an area that he thought would be suitable to establish a new settlement. And he eventually found an area that was called Dawn at that time. Today it's called Dresden, Ontario, Canada. It's right in proximity to where you're at out there in Detroit. And he was able to successfully establish a settlement called the Dawn Settlement. And he built the British American Institute. He led a Black militia during the rebellion of 1837. And he would also come back and forth into the United States in the role of an abolitionist. And it was during one of those journeys that he eventually met with Harriet Beecher Stowe after she got access to his biography that was already floating around in different reader circles amongst abolitionists here in the United States.
Okay, hold on, let me stop you there, because you're saying a lot of good stuff here. Let me get back on it though. Yeah. You said your family had something to do with him.
Yeah, so he's my third great grandfather. My grandmother was born through his family in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And she lived in the same community that Harriet Tubman and her ancestors lived in. And she moved here into the United States in 1925. So she gave birth to my father. My father has 7 children, and I'm the most intelligent and attractive.
Yeah. Okay, we can go with that one. Now, but for sure. So, okay, hold on. Let me make sure I got the guy that you mentioned. What's his name again?
Josiah Henson.
Okay, I've heard his name before. Okay, so he's related to you?
He's my third great grandfather. So he's the guy that people got the name Uncle Tom from, and he was not what people would define as a Uncle Tom. He was the exact opposite. But because of his journey and his story, when Harriet Beecher Stowe published that book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which really fully exposed what was happening in the slave system in the South, you had other different books that came out that undermined the narrative that she was sharing. And that's when you begin to get that caricature of what an Uncle Tom is, when in reality, he was a revolutionary.
Okay, okay, hold on. I like what you're coming from. So he escapes, and at 41, that's kind of late in life, even at that time, isn't that? That's right?
Absolutely. And
because by then you've been beat down a lot, you tired. Yeah. Lifespan might not even be a whole lot longer than that.
Yeah, and when he made his journey in 1830, to kind of put it in context, Harriet Tubman's name was Araminta at that time, and she was still enslaved on a plantation as a young girl. So he was a forerunner. He was one of the people who established that network that came to be ultimately known as the Underground Railroad.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. So now if you know any of this, how did he get from in what'd you say in Kentucky, or what'd you say? How did he get there? I mean, there was some horse and carriage. Was a ton of walking? What was that transportation mode like?
He did a ton of walking until he got to the northwestern area of Ohio. Once he reached that location, there was a tribe of indigenous people who welcomed him and his family into their territory and gave them shelter as well as food and pointed them into the direction of Sandusky, Ohio. Once he reached Sandusky, Ohio, he was able to board a ship called the Schooner Commerce that was captained by Captain John Burnham, who took them from Sandusky to Buffalo, New York. And it was from Buffalo, New York that he caught a rowboat across from a place called Broderick Park, or the foot of ferry, over to the Canadian side.
Okay, let me stop you there. Why, when he didn't get to Ohio, why don't he just say this is it? Why I gotta keep going? Do you think they were after him? The slave catchers were really pretty vigilant. Why not stop there? Or even when he get to Buffalo or something, why keep going?
Well, the same question is oftentimes asked about any of our people who've made that journey. So, for example, in New York State, slavery was abolished in 1827. So he crossed in 1830. So by the time he reached New York State, there were already people of African descent who lived and worked here. And they made this area their home. And some people were comfortable with that up until about 1850, when the Fugitive Slave Act was passed.
Okay.
People began to escape this country to get to freedom on the Canadian side. So you had people that formed freedom settlements further north, and then you have people who formed those settlements right across the Canadian border in places like Niagara on the Lake, Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada, St. Catharines, and then, like you mentioned earlier, as far up as Nova Scotia. So it was really about where they felt safe and comfortable in terms of having a community that would support their growth and development as a people.
Let me ask you this now. Okay, if the Underground Railroad is relatively new and there's no cell phones and all that, once he got to, let's say, Ohio, it was just a luck of the draw that he ran into somebody who was going to help him. I mean, that's God's blessing, what have you, right? Because he didn't know that, hey, I'm looking for Sarah Jones, the white chick that's going to help me. He walking down the street in the middle of the night and somebody says, hey, what you doing here? And he says, okay, I'll help you.
Exactly. And it's something that you alluded to earlier in regards to education and the ability to read and write. Our people, even though they were not able to be literate in the sense of reading and writing because they were restricted from doing that being enslaved, they knew how to read people, and they knew how to read the environment. And one of the best ways that people communicate is non-verbally. So a lot of that form of communication and being able to read people and read signs was very non-verbal. And thankfully, you had people who understood that non-verbal form of communication that began to develop that network that was underground because it was below the perception of everyday people.
I got you.
Railroad, because it was a mode of transportation.
I got you. Let me ask you this. Do we know, or do you know, like he left in the middle of the night and he was just able to run real fast to get away from them? How did he get from the plantation to maybe where he could not have to look back so much at that point? I always wondered about that.
Well, he didn't really run because he had 4 small children with him. 2 of them were so small, he had to carry them in a knapsack on his back the entire journey.
Really?
And that was something that was very uncommon when you think about these journeys in the Underground Railroad, that it was, it wasn't very common that people were able to take small children with them.
Yeah, that's what I gathered. Yes.
So he had to manage that particular process at the same time. You know, even when they were hiding under the cover of darkness, when it came to being in territory where it was heavily guarded by overseers and bounty hunters, they had to find a way to keep their children silent under
Yeah,
those
right.
circumstances, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so, you know, his story seems almost surreal. At one point in his journey, he didn't have a container in order to gather water for his family, so he washed his boot out and went to a stream and got water in his boot to be able to give um, that to his family. You know?
Does he ever come back for, like Harriet did for whatever reason? Do you know that?
Yep, he would still come back into the United States in the role of an abolitionist. And that's one important point that I always tell people, that when you're talking about the Underground Railroad, you're talking about a network, and people realize that their individual freedom was equal to the freedom of their people.
I got you. I love it.
It wasn't no mentality like, I'm gonna get mine, you need to get yours, I'm gonna do me and you need to do you. That was not the type of mindset that our people have. We realized that we needed one another, and that was the success of that type of network. And even when you had freedom seekers, once they crossed the Canadian side, like Harriet Tubman, like Josiah Henson, others, they would come back into the United States because a lot of times they left their family there.
Yes.
So they would maintain those relationships and do whatever that they could to help others. But then you also had those that once they came to the Canadian side, they never set foot in America again. But they still were instrumental in creating the type of network that was necessary to support the growth and development of our people, because they created settlement so that when people arrived to the Canadian side,
yes, I love it,
food, clothing, and shelter, they didn't have to look for anything outside of what we were able to provide for them. So they still were indebted in that way of connected to this network of freedom.
Did he was he ever able to get some education, talking about him in particular?
Yep. So his son, by the time he was 12 years old, his child became literate and was able to successfully teach him how to read and write in his older age.
I got it. I got you. So now for you yourself, did your great grandmother share some of this story with you? You know what I'm saying? Did you sit down and she told you, hey, my great grandfather is this guy, and let me tell it to you?
So this was just like common knowledge growing up in my family. You know, my parents were both affiliated with the Black Panthers. So they were very culturally conscious and socially aware. So they orientated me and my siblings around those two ideas. So I grew up knowing about our classical civilizations as the fathers and mothers and the first world people. I also learned about our sojourn here in the wilderness, North America, in terms of being able to meet some of the challenges that our people face that are indigenous here, and those of us who came through the Great Mayafa or the transatlantic slave trade. And then the Underground Railroad component, that's something that we just knew growing up. It was just common knowledge. And it also gave me a sense of pride and esteem that I realized that some of my peers didn't have because they weren't connected to these stories.
I got you. Did you ever see, is there ever, not a picture of him, but maybe is there some documents, archives as they like to call it, that you found in your family that go back some years?
Oh, yeah. So not only am I connected to Josiah Henson, and you know, if you were to just Google his name, there's a lot of sources that come up about him, but I'm also connected to Matthew Henson, who was an explorer.
Yeah, I heard that name.
And they show him every Black History Month with his Eskimo Parker on.
Yeah.
He's also one of my family members. So him being an explorer and having that fearlessness and that courage, me knowing that as a child, I knew for a fact that I had that capacity within me, because that is literally a part of my DNA.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So connecting to those type of stories, even if it's not just necessarily the Underground Railroad, but just knowing the stories of your own parents and their journeys in life, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents, your great grandparents, it gives you access to a reference library in life that allows you to not only navigate this society, but also to meet challenges and some of
Sure.
the same obstacles that they faced maybe 2 or 3 generations ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Is there any like say pictures or anything in your family of your great grandfather? And is there a picture of him, Josiah, that you can say, okay, I can see the resemblance? You know what I'm saying? How far any documents like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. So at our Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center here in Niagara Falls, I was one of the people who got the institution established, one of over 300 people that were a part of getting that institution established. We opened May of 2018, but the project itself took over a decade with the research that had to be done, the content that was connected to interpreting the research, building the installations. It took a period of time to get it established. And then my family story is also highlighted in one of the galleries that we have there.
Okay.
So there are images there of my father and Josiah Henson and some of the work that I do as an early childhood educator here in my city.
Give us a little idea of what the landscape is like there. Now, are you near Buffalo? Are you right there at the Niagara Falls?
Yep.
So on and so forth.
Yeah, so I'm right here in the city of Niagara Falls. It's a border town. And just like Buffalo, these were one of the most critical locations in terms of the Underground Railroad because it was literally just the Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, and then, the Niagara River here in the city of Niagara Falls to cross to get to freedom on the Canadian side. So when you think about that journey from the South, when people arrived here, this was literally the last place and the last destination before they got their freedom. Harriet Tubman crossed here in the city of Niagara Falls in December of 1856, about 2 blocks from where I currently live at here in the city of
Is
Niagara
that
Falls.
right?
So St. Catharines, where she eventually settled temporarily, is only about 30 miles from the city of Niagara Falls, New York. So it's a very rich, it has a very rich local history in terms of people of African descent. And that's something that I grew up knowing about. And it's something
Yeah.
that I'm proud to be able to celebrate and to share with others around the world, because the stories that happen here
Yeah.
didn't happen anywhere else but in the city of Niagara Falls.
Okay, if I'm a slave catcher, do I sit at the riverbank waiting on them to try to get away? Because I know this is the last spot, and I've heard the story. This is where they go. Are there instances like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, slavery was abolished in New York State in 1827. So after 1827, the further north that you would go, the more you started to see the development of the abolitionist movement, where people like Frederick Douglass lived 45 minutes away from the city of Niagara Falls, right in the city of Rochester. He would frequently visit the city of Niagara Falls. Um, that area itself had many sympathetic residents. So even if you were a bounty hunter and you arrived here, you wouldn't get a lot of help from the locals in terms of trying to retrieve someone's property because you were here
Yeah.
on free land and free territory. You did have some people who lived here who were pro-slavery, but they were outnumbered.
I love it. So when they got there, is there a neighborhood that's specifically a Black neighborhood in around that area? Names of neighborhoods in Niagara Falls, so on and so forth.
Yep. So the Black community here in the city of Niagara Falls developed over that time. Like the city itself of Niagara Falls was incorporated in 1892. Prior to that, there were 2 different hamlets, so to speak, or 2 different separate territories, Manchester and another area that was called Bellevue, that ultimately became known as Suspension Bridge Village. So people traveled here to the city of Niagara Falls to view the falls itself. This has always been a tourist attraction for people, but it also became a very attractive location in terms of Underground Railroad activity. We had one of the most active Underground Railroad locations here, known as the Cataract House Hotel, which was like one of the most luxurious hotels around the world in 1825 up until 1945 when it burned down by a fire. But that hotel, there was a head waiter that worked there by the name of John Morrison, who had a staff of all African-American men, and they led double lives as secret Underground Railroad agents.
Oh, really? Okay.
So you would have people who would travel here, and you would have enslavers coming from the South, bringing people that they enslaved as body servants on vacation, honeymoons, or for other different reasons. And it was under those circumstances that the wait staff at the Cataract House would be able to successfully separate enslaved people from their enslavers and get them across the border to the Canadian side. So they were very instrumental and heroic in terms of one of the most active locations here, not just in the city of Niagara Falls, but just the Underground Railroad as a whole.
Okay, that this might here. Let's say it might be a little funny. Okay, so my enslaver says, "Hey man, I'm going on vacation up to Niagara Falls." He said, "Cool, I want to go." So he gets up there, and then my man goes to sleep. He says, and then he escapes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So so there's a story of an enslaver that visited here, and he brought his the young woman that he enslaved. She was 15 years old, and he sent her down to the Cataract House kitchen to get some milk, and she just disappeared. So he's looking around and couldn't find her, and then he took a small search party over on the Canadian side to an area where there was a settlement of freedom seekers, people of African descent, in a place called Niagara on the Lake. He went there to strive to search the premises to see if he could find an enslaved girl, and they would not allow him to search the premises. So he came back across the Canadian border here to Niagara Falls, and once he left the Cataract House, he went back home to New Orleans where he lived and published a letter in their New Orleans newspaper warning people from visiting here at the Cataract House because they abduct your slaves.
Oh, really? Okay, I got you. Now, how close is it from Niagara, New York, your city, to Canada? Do they have to go on a little small boat, or there are other places like I talked about Quindaro where the water froze at given those years and what have you. Is it close enough proximity, or how did that go?
So where I currently live at, I live 1 block from the Canadian border. I could literally walk to the Canadian border from my house in 1 minute, literally. Prior to 18.
But no, hold on, let me stop you. When you say walk, you still got to go across a body of water, though, right?
Yes.
So, okay.
So I could reach the border from my home in like a minute. Prior to 1846, there was no bridge that allowed you to cross to the Canadian side. And that is also true of Buffalo, New York, which is also a border city. And people would cross in rowboats as well as steamships. And you had the rare occasion of a brother by the name of Oliver Purnell, who actually swam across the Niagara River to get to freedom on the Canadian side. That's how much freedom meant to him.
He made it?
Yep. He made it. And he actually was able to purchase land on the Canadian side, which he donated to a church that was named in the honor of a famous Black composer by the name of Nathaniel Dett. So that church still stands to this day over on the Canadian side, and it was constructed on land that was donated to the church.
I got you. I love it. Now, how far are you from the actual falls? Is there something to be worried about to being that close? Because it builds such a current that it is hard to swim across that area?
Yeah, so the rapids, people typically didn't swim across the rapids part of the Niagara River. They usually traveled across, if they swam like Oliver Purnell, it would be more in the lower river area where you don't have that much turbulence. But right at the base of where the American Falls is, that is the location that people like John Morrison, the head waiter at the Cataract House, would actually row people across in a rowboat over to the Canadian side. And they would have to walk down about 290 wooden steps to get to the river's edge in order to get into the rowboat to get rowed across to the Canadian side. And people wouldn't wait until the weather was nice either. They would travel across under different circumstances. It didn't matter what time of year it was or what hours of the day.
Well, now you talk about the location that they went to in Canada. Did and again, remind me, what was it became a community too over there. And are there still a lot of Black people who live in that community? Because they're the descendants of those who escaped to that community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing that you mentioned about you doing a screening of your film in Toronto, Toronto was the last location that the Honorable Marcus Garvey had a public speech at before he was eventually deported. So I say that to say, in terms of Black consciousness, there are a lot of our people who are very aware of who we are as a people, as well as our challenges and triumphs here in the wilderness of North America. So I wasn't surprised by the type of support that you would have gotten and that you did get for the film you were screening in Toronto, because there's a large community of our people that are not only descendants of freedom seekers that came from the States, but also our people who immigrated to Canada from the diaspora, different places in the Caribbean, as well as the continent of Africa, Brazil, and other different places that understand that we're connected as one people.
Yeah, I love it. Now, up in the museum that you have, that you all have started, where is it located? Is it located at the foot of the water in some historic site area?
Yep, it's it's right at the location where the historic suspension bridge was constructed. So I mentioned earlier that prior to 1846, you could only cross into Canada using a rowboat or a steamship, or in a rare case like Oliver Purnell, you could swim across. But in 1846, the suspension bridge was constructed, and that was on the north end of the city. And the Heritage Center, where we have our Underground Railroad museum at, is right outside the location of where that suspension bridge once stood. Today, there is a bridge that was built on top of the suspension bridge called the Nexus or the Whirlpool Bridge. And that is the actual location that Harriet Tubman crossed in December of 1856. So
you stayed there. Why didn't you leave to go someplace else? Because you want to stay a part of this history, tell the history. I mean, it's now become your calling, and you like living there. I mean, what?
Absolutely.
My question.
So Niagara Falls it's my home. It's a beautiful city, and as an educator, I'm connected to the youth who are here. I've been a youth mentor and an advocate for over 20 years. And a part of my purpose and my passion in life is to make sure that I can reach the youth as early as possible and set them on a type of trajectory that I was set upon in terms of finding my own purpose and passion in life. And
I love it.
I have a lot of various different projects, programs, and initiatives that I'm connected to here in the city. And
how big is the Black population there? I mean, is there quite a few Black people that live in that city that you are in?
Well, it's about 50,000 people that live here, a little less than 50,000 people now that live here in the city of Niagara Falls. And they're about 25% of the population that are people of African descent.
Oh, I got you. But then how close are you to Buffalo?
About 20 minutes from the city of Buffalo.
Okay, so you get some Buffalo vibe being there. And then you're probably maybe an hour at most from Toronto.
Yep.
Okay. Is there a festival that happens, a Black History festival, to acknowledge what has happened there, where you and maybe, I mean, your city and the Canadian city come together of some sort, or anything like that?
Well, traditionally, back in the 1800s, John Morrison, the head waiter at the Cataract House Hotel, at Emancipation Day celebration here in the city of Niagara Falls, he was presented a gold cane by some of the members of the African American community who wanted to honor him for his work as an agent of the Underground Railroad. And that celebration took place in the first week of August to celebrate Emancipation Day over on the Canadian side. That celebration has continued over the years and has transmutated into a celebration that eventually became known as the Black Experience here in the city of Niagara Falls.
Okay.
And also the Black Fest. Now, prior to it becoming the Black Experience and the Black Fest, there's always been a collaborative celebration of Emancipation Day by the African American community here in the city of Niagara Falls, as well as those people of African descent on the Canadian side, where you would typically gather on the Canadian side to celebrate Emancipation Day.
You say Emancipation Day. Why do y'all call that date the day when other people say Juneteenth? There's some people in Tennessee and in that region, they say the 8th of August.
Mm-hmm.
Why do y'all say that date?
So the Emancipation Day is really to celebrate the abolition of slavery throughout England and the British colonies. And that took place in 1834.
Okay.
So on the Canadian side, that is when slavery ended there. So there was an initial celebration of that on the Canadian side, which is the predecessor to the abolition of slavery or the Emancipation Proclamation here in the United States. So many of our people over here on the American side oftentimes have been descendants who escaped slavery here in the United States and made it to freedom on the Canadian side. Celebrate that Emancipation Day as the first acknowledgement of our freedom just as a people here in the Western Hemisphere.
I got you. I love it. I love it. Is there a question that I have not asked you? Something that I know I tried to cover, fair amount of stuff. Some question first of all, and have you written a book or about the family? Whatever.
I haven't written a specific book about like my family's history or anything like that, but I've written 21 books about various different subjects. I have a book that's called Eyes Wide Shut, The Science of Secret Societies. And I talk about the role of secret societies being special interest groups. And I also talk about the history of Prince Hall and the Boule and how they were established, Greek letter fraternities and sororities. And I talk about that type of history. I have another book about transactional analysis. So it's a psychology book that I wrote. And most of my books are along the lines of social commentary.
Okay.
5 of my books right now are in the British Library under a curatorial activism exhibit right now. So yes.
Do you have a website or people to follow you?
Yeah, so people can just actually go to Google and put in the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. And that is an institution that I established a couple years ago because I'm creating a early childhood learning center and an after school program here in my city to serve the youth in terms of helping them become more self-actualized and find their purpose in life. So the basis of that school is a cooperative. It's a community learning center. And I'm right in the midst of completing my renovation project right now. So if you go on Google and just look up the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters, then you will find a lot of information about that institution and the various different projects, programs.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'm gonna put it in the description here on the video. Did your one more last question I guess comes to mind. Did your father say something to you that said, hey man, you gotta be great because of this story? You know what I mean? I done told you this. Look at what you come from. You're lucky. You know what I mean? Because I always wonder that about people.
Yeah, you know what? My parents didn't have to do that, because they created the family dynamics that nurtured that type of perspective.
I love it.
Of not settling for anything less or not being mediocre. My mother, she was a social psychologist by trade. So she taught us a lot of things from an academic perspective. My father, he was a tradesman, but he also collected African artifacts. Like I mentioned, they were both affiliated with the Black Panthers. So they made sure that we constantly learned about the greatness of our people and instilling that in us. That's something that has been a way to guide us in the direction that me and my siblings have traveled in.
Yes, I love it.
I attended Central State University, which is a historically Black college and
Yes,
university. My older brother attended Alabama State. One of my
yes,
older sisters attended Morgan State. One of my other brothers attended Central State. And then I have two daughters that just graduated the last few years from Howard University.
yes,
And it wasn't that my parents said you need to go to a historically Black college and university. It's the way that they orientated us, that we
yes,
saw value in investing and being connected to our own people. So I
yes. I
grew up
love
with
it.
that all around me.
Yeah, I love it. I guess the last question I may have on you, and I want to go back to the museum. What's the exhibits in the museum, and how do people? What's the name of it again, and the hours or whatever,
Yes.
whatever.
So it is the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center. And if people are not local, we offer virtual tours of the museum.
Right,
So you can just simply email our museum info at Niagara Falls Underground Railroad.org,
right,
or you can email Evan at Niagara Falls Underground Railroad.org.
right.
And that is something that we offer. And the museum itself, it highlights stories of people of African descent primarily who lived and worked here in the city of Niagara Falls that were part of that Underground Railroad network. And these were everyday people who did extraordinary things in order to aid others. And the beautiful thing about it is, sometimes when we hear about the Underground Railroad, we hear about Frederick Douglass, we hear about Harriet Tubman, and then we get a bunch of white savior stories. We don't tell white savior stories at our Heritage Center. We tell you about everyday people who did extraordinary things in order to aid in the freedom
Oh,
of
I
others.
love it.
Yeah. You learn about the waiters that worked at Cataract House, as well as other staff members, such as a porter by the name of James Patterson, who saved money as a porter for 15 years and was able to successfully purchase his own land and establish his own hotel here in the city of Niagara Falls called the Free Soil Hotel. We have him, James Patterson, listed in the
I
census
love it.
data. He's listed in the census data here in the city of Niagara Falls in the 1850s with owning an estate valued at $3,000, which is equivalent to over $100,000 at that time.
Sure.
And this is a Black man that lived here in the city of Niagara Falls that started out as a porter, a baggage handler, working at the Cataract House Hotel.
Yeah.
So we share stories primarily surrounding the activities that was going on,
Yes.
the wait staff at the Cataract House Hotel. And then we also share information about Harriet Tubman, a young woman by the name of Anna Marie Wims, who crossed here in the city of Niagara Falls in 1855. And she disguised herself as a man by the name of Joe Wright, and was able to take a train from New York City all the way here to the city of Niagara Falls and to emancipate herself by disguising herself as someone who she was not. And that was the reasoning for that, was to avoid enslavers and bounty hunters, because they would oftentimes put rewards out for people who had escaped. So she didn't want to fit any of the description, and she was able to successfully make that journey as a teenager from New York City here to the city of Niagara Falls.
I got you. Yeah, well, hey, I love it, man. You knocked it out the box because it was easy for you. This in your family.
Oh,
You
yeah.
had to go though, man. So let me just tell you what I know. And so that was beautiful. And then also that you keep this going. That you found this to be your calling.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody on Strong Inspirations, I'm telling you, I find these people, I don't know how. Somebody might have referred me to this brother or what have you. And my man was so gracious to find time to come on here and share this story with you. And we're going to put the books and everything in the description. Everybody, so hit the subscribe button on the channel.
I wanted to mention this too. I encourage everybody to check out the series called Enslaved that's hosted and that is executive produced by Samuel L. Jackson. I had the honor to be a part of that series. Oh. And the series chronicles the transatlantic slave trade, and it follows a team of Black scuba divers who are marine archaeologists, and they're
Yeah.
examining the remnants of ships associated with the transatlantic slave trade
Yeah.
and the stories connected to them. So I'm in one of the episodes discussing the Underground Railroad and 2 ships that we discovered in Lake Michigan that's connected to that particular history. So the series is called Enslaved, and it's executive produced and hosted by Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, I love it because it's funny you say that. I have a couple things on the channel relative to that. One, I got a lady who's a PhD at George Washington, Dr. Brynum, Blydem. She grew up in Sierra Leone as her parents, left here on that back to Africa migration back in the day. And she talks about that dynamic. But then also I have a guy who is the founder of Diving with a Purpose. Maybe that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's Diving with a Purpose.
Yeah, that's it. I got my man Kenneth Stewart on the channel.
Okay, yeah.
Oh man. And so he tells that story about what they do.
That's who we were working with, Diving with a Purpose.
Yep, that's him. I got him on the channel.
Oh, that's excellent.
Check out the video, everybody. Like I tell you, folks, this thing has grown to where I can now relate stuff to people. I tell you, you stay at it long enough, which I'm going to do because I'm having fun and I'm learning a lot. That I can relate these stories, and so all that is there. Plus, when yours will be there too, we covering it all, man.
Yeah.
I even have. Huh?
With the brother you was talking about with Diving with a Purpose, I worked more intimately with Kramer Wimley, who's also a part of Diving with a Purpose. So it would be great if you were connected with him to see if he could be on here, because he could share a lot more information about that journey and his experience.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna reach back to Brother Stewart in that regard. I tell you, I find these people here at Strong Inspiration, so hit the subscribe button. It's free. Let me tell you, my friends, I just got to 600 subscribers, maybe in the last day or so. I want to be at 5,000 in the next 3 months. And all that means is people telling other people to hit the subscribe button, which is free. We don't ask no information. I know you're going to like this video. You're going to have to hit the button on this video for sure. Please do. Hit the notifications bell. And my friends, come on now. Tell somebody about our Strong Inspirations. Don't keep this to yourself, because we're jamming and you want to act like you know everything. Do that for us. And watch my movie, read my book, support this brother in his cause. All that will be there. Let's go up there to Niagara and go by the museum next summer in August. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're gonna come up there and hang out. Let's do that, everybody. You can get a chance to see that big waterfall, which is a cute thing. I've done it 3-4 times, and it's always pretty amazing. So with that, I say to you, my brother, with all sincerity, my man, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing, being who you are, putting your time and effort, your money and all that to see that them younger people be better people. That's a beautiful thing. That's a calling. Please continue to do that. And with that, I'll say bye-bye, we out.
All right. Thank you.
Peace.